Sunday. They're going to go get their Letterman jackets again. The Indianapolis Colts are 2-6 against the Titans since Pat McAfee came up here and did his wrestling announcement. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they haven't had back-to-back winning seasons since I was a senior in high school.
What's up, Titans fans, and welcome to another edition of Titans Global Podcast. I'm your host, Maximus Titan Fan, and as always, with me is my good friend Link.
Absolutely, good to be here, guys. I know all of our Tennessee viewers, they're watching some snow outside, so glad y'all could be here with us. As you can see, I'm in a different place, different little setup tonight. I got stuck myself, but we're here for it, ready to talk some Titans. And as always, make sure y'all like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you comment. The show is for you guys, and we want to talk to you. We want to hear your opinions, so come with it.
Absolutely, become part of the show.
That's right.
So anyway, tonight, the season's over for us. I'm enjoying anyway, some of this postseason action we're getting. Had some really good games so far this year. And as far as we go, we're just going to talk about our grades, what we feel like the team did. Tonight we're going to cover the offense. The dreaded, terrible offense that we had.
Yeah, not the best grades. Going to be a little bit of controversy I feel like tonight. But again, I mean, it was a struggle all year. It was definitely one of their weaker points this season was the offense. Just seemed at times like they just weren't able to keep up with some of the better offenses in this league. This wasn't a team that was ever going to win a shootout this season. That's for sure.
No, they did all right at utilizing their talent, but I mean, you can tell that there was more there. There was more juice they could have squeezed out there.
Yep.
That's all I want to say. As far as the passing goes, we ranked overall 28th in the NFL, 180 average yards per game, which is pretty darn terrible. We had 14 touchdowns in the passing, 28th in the league. That was on 494 attempts, 304 completions, 29 attempts per game average. That's actually up from last year, which is nice to see. And the balance is there, if you'll notice later when I talk about all the numbers. But to cover the passing people, I already did my Levis grade.
Mm-hmm.
I gave him an A-. Link, I think you gave him a C+?
C+ to B-. Yep, right around that range.
Ryan Tannehill, for me, obviously doesn't have the rookie curve. He did, I guess, close to Levis, except for the interceptions, had 7 interceptions on 4 touchdowns.
Yep.
So he had 4 fumbles also.
Yep.
So for me, Ryan Tannehill, D-.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, it looked like at times the accuracy was there just as far as when he was completing passes. The interceptions, they did turn out to be a huge problem. And I mean, gosh, we keep going back to that ever since seems like the playoff loss in Cincinnati. I mean, we've seen the issues in the interception category. But you got to remember too, I feel like a lot of times this year he was playing some softer defenses because he was either playing in blowout situations or they were just trying to pound the ball, and the secondary was just kind of doing what they had to in coverage to limit the long stuff. Again, the biggest take for me on Tannehill this year, aside from the interceptions, would have been the sack numbers. I know Levis was sacked 28 times. Tannehill was sacked 32. Still just seems like even going forward in his career, wherever else it may be, just seems like he's standing in that pocket a little bit too long, just kind of unsure where to go with the ball. Some of that could be scheme. Some of that could be Tannehill kind of seeing ghosts and hearing footsteps. But he's got to clean that up. If he wants to find future success in this league with any team, he's got to be able to get rid of the ball. He's got to be able to feel pressure a little bit better. Just have a better pocket presence. And I think that's what got it for me this year was I just didn't feel like he really got comfortable and had that pocket presence.
Yeah, I kind of agree, man. I don't know. Like you said, he really has never been the same since that Bengals game. Yeah. But this year, to me, he came in almost like, I don't know if he was still a little injured or if he was just scared, you know? I mean, that happens to a lot of guys late in their career. You know, they get that one big hit, they get injured, they're older, they don't heal as fast as they feel like they should be. They're a little ginger, cautious, and that's, you know, for Tannehill, he was mid, you know, I mean, at his best, he was good.
Yeah.
I don't know that he was ever great though.
No. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I feel like the future, obviously, I mean, I think everybody sees it at this point. The future is much brighter with Levis. I think he's able to do more. I think he has a stronger arm, just being a younger quarterback. But yeah, I feel like Tannehill, just the age and the limitations that he has and the injuries. I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't think he's going to, but I wouldn't be shocked if I find out that, you know, he retires tomorrow, just because he's kind of done taking the hits that he's had to endure on this team. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he will try to go somewhere else and play. But yeah, it's just the time here at Tennessee is done. I mean, and he knows it. You know, the organization knows it, especially now with Vrabel gone. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I wish him the best, and you know, he had some good runs here at Tennessee, but time to move on to the future, and that's Will Levis.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Levis is the future. You know, I can't talk about the passing guys without talking about Derrick Henry. I gave him an A for his passing efforts in this season. 2 for 3. Yeah. And 2 touchdowns. What's up?
Yep.
Before Ryan Tannehill came back from his injury, he had the exact same number of touchdowns.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Oh man, that's anyway. Malik Willis, do I even have to grade him? I mean, really, do I?
Yeah, I kind of wish, and this goes back, you know, we talked about when the Levis injury happened and Tannehill ended up getting the start, and I'm pretty convinced at this point that was a variable decision. If you watch the Coliseum podcast, I said that at times it felt like he might have picked favorites a little bit. Mm-hmm. I still wish we could have seen a little bit more of Willis when the Levis injury happened, because you still need to figure out if this guy is going to be your backup. And I'm not sold one way or another at this point. I would like to see him in a different offensive scheme. I think that it is possible that he could have success. I mean, when the draft happened and they took him, I liked the upside to him. I mean, he's a mobile quarterback. We saw him. Now, I know the competition at Liberty wasn't exactly what you're seeing in the NFL, but I will be curious to watch him. I think he will be here in the preseason when the new campaign starts. And I'm still curious to see if this guy could be a quarterback. I think that they'll bring in some competition for him. He's definitely going to have to earn his roster spot this year. I don't think anything's a given at this point for Willis. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I want him to push the guy and just figure out if he could be, you know, a long-term solution in a backup role.
Yeah. All right.
I know it's yeah. Just gloss over that. It's a tough
leave
take.
Leave that alone, man.
It's a tough take, but again, I mean, right now, I still don't feel like we've seen enough of him in the right scheme. I
will agree with you on that. They are definitely not catering to his skill set.
Exactly.
If they were, he'd be in an offense more like Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
Or Lamar Jackson's early days, where it was more run first, kind of option, quick reads, that kind of offense.
Yep, agreed.
So as far as passing goes, I pretty much gave the whole crew a C overall.
That's fair.
I mean, it's just because I gave Levis such a high grade.
Yeah.
If I graded Levis more like you, they'd have like a D minus. I'd say
D to C minus, I think, maybe D to D plus, somewhere around that range. But again, and it's not necessarily a knock on Levis. I just don't think this year they were able to get the scheme figured out. And I kind of wish, hindsight's 2020, and it was never going to happen. I would have kind of been interested to see what Levis did with a full season. I think it'd be a lot easier to feel comfortable with a grade at that point. I'm glad they didn't just throw him to the Wolves, but I'm definitely excited to see him in a full season next year. I think the potential is definitely there, and I think he's got a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, I really hope that they take into consideration, or I hope the big part of the consideration of who our new head coach is going to be is the fact of who can mentor Levis and really elevate him to another level.
Yep.
That's what I'm hoping that they're really looking for more than anything.
Yeah, I agree.
And we'll get into a little bit of that later on, but not much. As far as rushing goes, overall team 108 average per game. 12th, that's 17th. They're 12th in the NFL for touchdowns at 16. Mm-hmm. Average attempts per game, 26 to 29 passing is what I said earlier. So you see, pretty balanced. Mm-hmm. Still didn't really do us much of good because our scoring was still 17.9 points per game, which last year it was 17.5. Mm-hmm. So we moved up a whopping 0.4 of a point. Woo!
Yep. Where would you grade Derrick Henry specifically?
Specifically, Derrick Henry, I gave him a B plus.
Okay. I was kind of teetering around the B minus, and still I think what he was able to do this year as being the second leading rusher in the league is still noteworthy. There's one stat that really got me and was kind of a knock for me on Derrick Henry, and I don't want to get to Tajay Spears' grade yet, but you had 280 carries from Derrick Henry, you had 100 from Tajay Spears. When you look at big plays, those are 20-plus yard carries, the chunk plays. Derrick Henry only had 5, while Tajay Spears had 3, with 180 more carries. And that, to me, really speaks volumes of Derrick Henry not getting to that second level. Now, I know you can put a lot of that on the offensive line, but Tajay Spears is running behind the same offensive line Derrick Henry is. So maybe it says more about what Tajay Spears is able to do and the explosiveness that he has. But for Derrick Henry to only have 5 of those 20-plus yard carries, that's just not something we're used to here at Tennessee. I mean, we're used to him getting to that second level. We're used to him outrunning the secondary. And it just felt like he was never able to break one this year. Just never. I know he had some big runs, but you didn't see him consistently breaking those tackles like we're used to.
He oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but he does appear to have maybe just a smidge. I'm not even just a smidge. He might have slowed down just a smidge. He even made a joke at the end of the season at the big 69-yarder that he busted off there against the Jaguars. And he said when he got tackled that he was getting old.
Yeah.
Which I thought it was funny, but it was also kind of telling. It was like, yeah, because 2 years ago, man, before your foot injury, you wouldn't have got caught. There's no way. You would have had the wide eyes and just like that's what Henry looks like when he's going for a touchdown.
Yep.
But I'm just going to say real quick, the stats between Henry and Spears is real easy. 280 attempts, 1167. That's really eye-popping, but the number that pops to me is 12 touchdowns on Henry. Mm-hmm. As far as Spears goes, 100 attempts on 450 yards, only 2 touchdowns, but he has a 4.5 yard average for the year, where Henry has a 4.2 yard average for the year. That's where that pops up for me. So Henry's great at getting touchdowns.
Yeah.
But as far as busting those big yardage plays, that's where Spears is hitting it right now.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
you nailed it on the head with the busting out the big plays, but Henry's still good at getting touchdowns, which means he would be a great complementary back if he was willing to take a pay cut or something like that. But I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just throwing it out there for the king. If he just wants to stay a Tennessee Titan, it's cool.
I agree. And I think that, just showing those touchdowns shows that Tennessee may have not been utilizing him the right way. And if he does go on to another team, I feel like that's his primary threat. It's a short yardage threat and it's a red zone threat because he's still big enough to just bowl over guys and get through a line and get those touchdowns. That does bring me to a little bit of question, and I've been thinking about it more and more this week since the Mike Vrabel firing. Do you think bringing in a new coach gives Derrick Henry a better, worse, or same chance of staying with the Titans next year? Do you think it matters?
I think it depends on who he gets.
Okay. That's fair.
And the reason I say that is for example, if we were to get like Callahan, the video that we saw that they played last week with the podcast, the Coliseum podcast, it appears that he would be in favor of using Derrick Henry. But with Slowick or Johnson, I don't
think move on.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know what type of numbers he's looking for. And I don't put it past him. I'm sure Derrick Henry's the type of guy, he's going to shop around and just kind of feel the waters. But man, I don't think there's going to be a lot of high dollar offers out there for him. I just don't.
I think he's probably going to start asking for 12. I think more than likely he'll end up with like 8 or 10 from if he wants to go big money route.
So what number are you comfortable with? And I know I'm throwing all this out. We didn't even talk about this, but what number would you be comfortable with as a Titans fan? Because my number, I would say 9. I mean, does that sound?
I was thinking 6 to 8.
Okay. That's fair.
I mean, I think what were we paying him? 16?
Roughly.
I think it was 16. So at 8, that's exactly half.
Okay.
I'm halving your salary.
Okay. That's fair.
Because you're only going to be doing half the work. Tajay Spears is going to be not the feature back, but yeah, probably. I mean, you're probably going to get more carries than you if you want to stick around. So, I mean.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say I would be comfortable around the 9 mark. My ideal situation would be around the 7 mark, 6 to 7 mark with incentives. I feel like you could really load up. You could really load up incentives for the guy and say, hey, you're our red zone guy. I mean, you go out and get 10, 15 touchdowns, we got you. But yeah, not to get too deep into that. I know, we've still got a long way to go, but just talking about his grading scale and stuff and the coaching search, I feel a lot more comfortable if Henry did stay, because it would have concerned me if he stayed and we had the same coaching staff, because I felt like they would have kept doing the same thing with him. So getting a new coaching staff in here, if he stayed, I would feel a little bit more comfortable going into the new season.
All right. I'll give you that. So overall, just to wrap up the rushing area, I was giving it an A-.
Okay.
Overall. By the way, I didn't grade Jonathan Ward because he only had, I think, 4 carries or 6 carries for the entire season.
Yep.
I didn't grade any of the quarterback rushing because that's dumb. We're not running quarterbacks, or at least most of the time we're not.
Yeah, I feel like it's an injustice to give the running backs less than an A- to an A with what they had to work with the offensive line. If you're talking about just the running game as it relates to the running backs, I'm definitely around that A- to A range because they just had no blocking.
Yeah, I was going to say, you definitely got to, my rookie curve, you definitely got to give them a little bit of a curve because they were, I mean, as I don't like PFF grades, but they were graded as the worst offensive line by PFF. And I actually agree with that. I think they are the worst line in the NFL.
Yep.
Terrible.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing they're good at. I mean, it's that simple. When you're giving up that many sacks and that many tackles for loss, I mean, it's just if I were grading the line, I mean, it's going to be around an F range just because they were, and it wasn't just PFF. I mean, they didn't pass the eye test. I mean, just the eye test. You watch Titans football games, and it just seemed like it was their downfall week after week after week.
Levis only had an average of 2.7 seconds, I think, or 2.4 seconds, something like that, on every single drop back in the game against Houston, the second one. That is an insane stat, dude. The entire game, that was his average time, less than 3 seconds. You get more than that in flag football. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and credit to him. And, you know, it goes back to the conversation. He's got the arm talent to still make some pretty miraculous throws, even having that little time. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting offseason, but as far as the running game goes, yeah, I'm with you on the A range for that, just given what they had to work with.
All right, man. So we're going to talk about receivers now.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Hopkins, our only, you know, I'm not going to say our only real receiver, because we had a couple decent ones, but our only really true receiver, you know, legit NFL receiver. But he got 1,057 yards and 75 receptions. He was targeted, though, 137 times. Only got 70. That's almost half. So that's not great. But 14 yards per catch, that's pretty sweet. And 7 touchdowns, that's pretty sweet. I gave him an A. Even though, I mean, I don't know, it's probably more like an A-.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like at his age and what he's been able to do, and when you look at the target numbers, the one knock that I'll give, I'm probably around more of a B range. And the reason being for that is when you look at the target numbers, he nearly doubled the next highest targeted player, which was Chig. I would like to see more catches with that amount of targets. Now, I know some of that was him maybe not being on the same page, and he also had 2 quarterbacks this season, and that does make a difference. I mean, it's a difference of, you know, it's a difference of where they're going to spot the ball. It's a difference of what kind of route they want you to run, how fast they want you to run that route. Are they putting it in front of you? Or are they putting it on the numbers? So I don't attribute all of those drops to Hopkins. Some of them were just non-catchable balls, but I'm closer to a B. I feel like if he had a good complementary receiver to help him, he would have been a lot better off. There were just times where, I mean, he was being thrown to in double coverage, and it was as simple as that. And you can't expect any receiver to go up and make every single play when he's the only receiver the defense is worried about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure when he signed on, you know, he was sold on Burks just like everybody else was. Yep. You know, he saw the offseason that Burks probably had. He probably had heard rumors around the workouts and you know what I mean? That's just kind of how it goes in the NFL. Your small circles, everybody talks to everybody.
Yep.
But just to kind of blast through the receivers, because there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
Chig was our number 2 receiver, which is kind of, you know, I guess surprising, but crappy. Because he still only got 528 yards. But he did catch 54 of 77 receptions, which is better than I thought. And just imagine if he didn't have brick hands for the first quarter of the season.
Exactly.
But he did, so. Only 1 touchdown, though, man. Where are you at on that, Chig?
Yeah. Yeah. And going into this season, I really expected him to be kind of an X factor. And I still think he's got the potential to be that. But like you said, just a horrid first half of the season. I mean, it was at a point where I was like, take him off the field. I mean, it really got ugly there for a little while. And I will say credit to him. I think a big part of this season for me was him being able to overcome that. And I respect that, because a lot of guys, it gets in your head and they're never able to recover from it. But Chig came back. He had a good second half of the season, and props to him for getting number 2 on the receiver list.
What's your grade?
If I combine the 2 halves of the season, I'm probably a C+. C+.
Well, I was actually a C. But yeah, I mean, you know.
Now looking at the second half, I mean, you're a solid B to B plus. I don't know if I'm ready to say A yet on the second half, but he definitely made some plays. And if it had been flip flopped, if he had a good first half of the season and a bad second half of the season, I feel like I'd be looking at this a little bit differently, and I'd probably be a little bit harsher. But I'm still excited to see him back next year and see what he can do. But yeah, combining them together, I'm saying C plus.
Yeah, but let's be honest. We really thought Burks was going to be there at number 2.
Exactly.
I really thought, you know, if not 2, he'd definitely be at number 3, but he's not. It's Chris Moore.
Yep.
And Chris Moore, you know, this is something that kind of surprised me is how many games people played. All these guys that I'm listing off are at 17 games, unless I say otherwise.
Yes.
So Chris Moore had 22 receptions on 35 attempts, 424 yards. That's 19.3 yards.
Yep.
Average a catch. That's insane. No touchdowns.
Yeah. Another one.
I don't care how many yards. This is why I say that NWI is more valuable than Chris Moore. Because he had less targets, more receptions, and 3 touchdowns. He had less yardage, but he had more touchdowns. And for me, I don't really care about yards because those are padded stats. Yep. I want to see touchdowns. You put points on the board. That is, for me, the best stat of all.
Yep. I'm right there with you on NWI. The big one that stuck out to me with Chris Moore, other than the 0 touchdowns, is that yards per catch, that 19.3. Man, we saw him go up and make some great catches this year.
Oh man. Yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough because you look at that, and that's one of those guys you really want on your team because at any given moment, he can go up and make a huge catch. But if I'm debating between him and NWI at this point, I feel more comfortable with NWI on this team. He's kind of been the constant. He just keeps showing up game after game. And I dogged on him last year, and I dogged on him this year. But, man, the more I watch this guy, he just keeps coming back, and he doesn't care. So if it came down to one or the other at this point, I'm with you. I think the touchdowns means more, and I'm riding with NWI over Moore.
Yeah, man. That's pretty much been my argument for the last quarter of the season. Pretty much is, you know, I keep bringing up the fact, yeah, Moore has these great catches, but you know, when it comes down to substance, I'd rather have NWI.
Absolutely.
I can't believe I'm saying that. That is nuts. But we'll talk about it later. But NWI is one of my locks for next year. That's insane.
Yeah,
did I just say that?
About. Yep. Crazy to think about. Oh my gosh.
And I'll be happy about it. That's nuts.
Yep.
Anyway, Henry was I skipped Spears. Spears, 52 catches on 70 attempts, 385 yards, 1 touchdown.
Yep. And
Henry, the reason that I was mostly impressed with his season wasn't so much the rushing. It was the receiving yards, 28 of 36, 214 yards. Not so much yardage, but still, man, 7.6 yards per catch. It's a solid B, man.
Yeah. I'm with you on a B, and that's something in his game that's kind of been a knock on him to this point in his career. But this year, for whatever reason, he was able to find success. And I don't remember what game it was, but he had a catch on the sidelines where he goes up and stretches out. And I mean, he looked straight up like a receiver. He just looked like a huge tight end / receiver. So I was really proud of him this year. I think he got some really good tape, and of course, other teams in the league, they know what he's about already. Yeah. But man, you best believe if he's sending tape out, some of those catches are going to be on there because he was.
It looked good.
It did, and it's something that we haven't seen from him to this point. So I'm real happy he was able to make it that high on those. And 28 catches on 36 targets. I mean, that's not something to scoff at for a running back, especially of his size.
I was going to say, especially on 250 pounds, what is he, 6'2" or 6'4"?
He's got to be 6'4", got to be. But yeah, credit to him. He was able to do it. So yeah, Derrick Henry as a receiver, I mean, it's hard to not give him an A just for what he is and what he's been able to do.
So we finally come across Burks
Oh,
at number 7.
yeah.
7th receiver in yards.
Yeah.
He's the 7th receiver in targets too. So
Yeah.
but only 16 catches, 221 yards. That is a 13.8 average, which is nice. And it could have been better if he'd have caught that one last week, but whatever. So I gave him a D minus based on, again, I have a rookie curve. I have the offensive line curve for the running backs. And I also have a first round draft pick curve, which works in the opposite way.
Yep.
I expect more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the biggest one. And I'm an F. I'm an F on Burks. And the one that stands out to me most is 11 games played.
Oh.
When you can't get on the field and find consistency, you're not going to have success in this league. And I know I've talked about it before, but one of the knocks on him coming out of the draft was cardio. It was being able to keep up in game. And I think we saw that more this year than we have before. And a lot of that was just him not being able to be at practice and not being on the field. But I think that hurt him more than anything else, because people say that he was running basically decoy routes, which I don't fully agree with, but I can see the point behind that. But I feel like a lot of the routes that they were giving him was routes where he's not having to expend a lot of energy. I mean, that it's just as simple as that. So yeah, I mean, if I hope he can recover from it, and I hope he's able to find success. This year just wasn't it for me. I'm an F on Burks.
Yeah, look, man, let me squash all that decoy route bull crap, because that is exactly what it is, man. Do you think that anybody out there thinks that the Titans coaches didn't want Treylon Burks to succeed more than we did?
Yep.
It's just silly.
Yep.
Their jobs depend on it, and they're probably losing their jobs because if he would have had a 1,000-yard season sitting up there with Hopkins, I guarantee you we wouldn't have lost 5 of those 7 or 8 games.
Absolutely.
That we were so close on. So then we're in the playoffs. We're talking about a completely different offseason.
Yep.
But and Chig, Burks and Chig both did not produce like we thought.
No.
It stinks.
No, I would have liked to see going into this season, and I don't have this written down anywhere, but just kind of going off of memory, I would have liked to see Burks. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins should be and was your number 1 receiver. I mean, I have no complaint about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would have expected Treylon Burks to be maybe 1,100, somewhere around that range, and I would have expected Chig to be around the 800 mark.
I was going to say 8, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that to me that would have been a successful season for the receivers, and we weren't even close to that. Not even close.
Yeah, I guarantee you, I can look at my notes with my notebook or whatever for the shows. I guarantee you that's what I projected him for, was 8 and 5, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns.
Yep.
That's all we needed. That's what I kept saying. We don't need superstar play from Chig. If we just get average play from Chig, we get what we expect out of Treylon Burks and out of Hopkins, we'll be fine.
Yep.
But I also didn't expect us to have the worst line in the league. So
yeah, that too. But yeah, I never thought at this point this year, looking back, I never thought I'd be sitting here questioning whether Treylon Burks can even be a number 3. And I am. I question the fact if he can even be a number 3 or a number 4 on this team at this point.
At this point, I'd rather have NWI.
Yeah, exactly. And I never thought I'd say that, but here we are, man. 2023 was crazy.
It is, man. I mean, it was what, 60, well, almost 60 degrees about 10 days ago, and now we've got 8 inches of snow sitting outside. I don't understand that.
Yep.
But whatever, we're starting off the year cool. Phillips, I'm not going to talk about him too much, man. It was just a disappointment too. Wiley, he did okay, but just okay.
Yeah.
Average season for a rookie picked in the 5th round.
Yep.
But I can't not talk about the one receiver that made me smile the most when I saw his name on our chart, which is Jeffrey Simmons. Yeah.
Big year for Simmons in the receiving category. I mean, hey, it worked. Whatever they were doing with him worked. Yep. Yep.
I gave him an A, which did kind of offset my grade average point a little bit, but I don't care.
Yeah, I mean 101 for a touchdown. It doesn't get much better than that. So he found success.
All right. So did I say what I gave the overalls on the wide receivers?
Don't think you did on receiving. No.
For me, it's a C because of the offset really from Jeffrey Simmons. Had I not given him an A, it probably would have been, had he not been in there, it would have been somewhere around D minus.
Yeah, I can see that, and I'm the same way. I think it's hard to give if you take Simmons out. I think it's hard to give any better than a D minus. And a lot of that, even without Simmons, a lot of that's being offset by Hopkins for me too. So, I mean, if you take Hopkins out of this equation,
that's the only.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Him and NWI, and NWI is really only a bright spot because of expectation.
Exactly.
I didn't have any.
Exactly.
So, but
exactly.
other than that, man, those two are the only real bright spots in our receiving core this year that really made my eyes go, wow.
Yep, you're going to need some acquisitions this year, and you're going to need them outside of the draft. You're definitely going to need to bring in some free agents. And I think, from the talk that I've heard in the chatter, like I don't think it's a situation where DeAndre Hopkins is wanting out at this point. I think he is around for at least. I mean, he's under contract, but I think he is a little bit more excited about going into this offseason. And I think his success next year is really going to depend on who you can put around him and who you can put in that second receiver role. And I think you have to do that in free agency.
Well, and really, I think he just really likes Levis. I think that's what it is. I think the kid's got an arm. He sees that. He understands if we get a burner, then that's really the only missing piece we have. Then we can start eating up the middle of the field with Chig and use Hop as a possession receiver or, anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you came here expecting Tannehill and you found Levis, you're not going to be upset about that. No. You know what I mean? No. So yeah, I think it's good, but the receiving core as a whole, again, I'm right there with you. D minus Simmons, and I don't know if there's a grade below an F without Hopkins, but I mean, just pitiful all the way around.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm with you.
All right, so offensive line. Before we break it down, what is your overall grade for the offensive line?
F. Absolute F. Absolute F.
I gave him a D minus, and the only reason is because of Skoronski.
Okay.
Skoronski and I have to say I was surprised by a couple of these stats, but Brunskill and Hubbard, if he was available more, his availability is the only thing that brings this grade down a little bit.
Yeah. For me, the NPF was a big one, not having him those first 6 games because of suspension. I mean, it was all downhill from there
for the rest of the season.
Exactly. It was all downhill from there for me. I think they were able to find some success with who they had. It just seemed like they were outmatched. And you've got a lot of guys that started on this offensive lines that would be good as backups on other teams. And that was the knock for me. So yeah, I mean, I guess they did okay with what they had, but the size wasn't there. The skill wasn't there. The scheme wasn't there. It just felt like, and again, we preach consistency all the time on this show, and there was just no consistency at all this year.
Yeah, I'm not gonna dwell on it, but let me just rattle off some numbers for you. Dillard had 331 snaps, 41 pressures, 12 sacks allowed. That's tied for number 1 in the NFL.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, and 5 penalties. That's tied for the highest on the team. Duncan, 207. Man, 9 sacks given up. That's 4th overall. That's insane. He didn't even play that much.
Yep.
And 4 penalties. Again, huge. Now, let me just throw this in there. Skoronski, 521 snaps. So over 200 more than, well, not quite Dillard, but almost.
Right.
And he only allowed 5 sacks and 1 penalty.
Yep. And did it as a rookie.
Yes.
Yep.
Huge difference there. And Brewer, which it's sad that he's such a good run blocker.
I agree.
I really hate that because he does have a really good run blocking grade, but I still don't care. He allowed 6 sacks, and that's just terrible.
I think. Do you think some of that has to do with size? And I don't have his numbers right in
Yeah.
front of me as far as his metrics, but it felt like in the pass blocking he was just getting ran over.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're run blocking, you can kind of finesse a little bit because you can kind of line up, you can get somebody on your side, you can stick and move. But with pass blocking, I mean, they were just bull rushing him, and he just couldn't hold up.
Here's the thing: him and Nate Davis are pretty close to the same size, except
Okay.
Nate Davis is a little bit heavier than him.
Right.
Nate Davis was a good guard. Aaron Brewer isn't. They thought that he was going to be a good center. Heck, I thought he was going to be a good center. But clearly he wasn't. I mean, and what kills me is they didn't try Corey Levin at any point throughout the season. It's that whole daily situation all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrating, man. And I think I really want to see them. I think that's going to move on because, I think that was Vrabel's doing. Radens, he was horrible this season too. He gave up 5 sacks. And the bright spots were on the right guard side and the right tackle side, because Brunskill had 449 snaps. Out of 449 snaps, he only gave up 2 sacks. Only had 1 penalty. Pass blocking grade was a 67. Run blocking grade was a 62. I wasn't that impressed by the eye, but by the stat, he looks pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'm with you there. For the eye test for me did not hold up well. I mean, seeing the numbers, I mean that's great. For what he is. But going into this season, I was more worried and I don't really know why, but I was more worried about the right side than I was the left.
Me too.
And I don't really have a good explanation for that. Just something told me that the right side would struggle more, but man, what a difference. I mean, just the eye test, the statistics, the left just got blown up this year.
My reasoning for this is because if you take him and Hubbard, which had really very similar scores to him,
right?
If you take those two and Skoronski, who had pretty decent scores, blocking, run blocking, and pass blocking, and then you put good people around them, give them a good left tackle, give them a good center. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Find a guard somewhere. I don't care.
Yeah.
And then you've got a pretty decent O-line. That's my point. I made it a couple shows ago with Skoronski. If you're trying to help this guy and you're trying to help this guy, and both times you're damned because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, then you're completely frustrated.
Yep.
And all you can do is just block your man and do your thing. But if you've got a guy over here that you can trust to make the block, and you've got a guy over here that you can trust to make the block, or that you can pass somebody off to when they're, doing a different, it's just a completely different story when the guy next to you is at least somewhat talented.
Exactly.
That's my point.
Yeah, and we've seen it. Like I said, I think we talked a couple of shows back. We've seen it in the secondary. I mean, when you're having to cover for everybody else because they're giving it up, I mean, you're gonna have more issues doing your own job. And that was the biggest thing for me on this offensive line was all they had to do was their job. And it just seemed like no matter what the play was, somebody was getting beat. And it wasn't the same guy over and over and over. We've seen that this year, but typically it was one guy gets beat and then you move down the line, the next guy gets beat. And we saw defenses, I think it started especially around the Tampa Bay game when I think it was Vita Vea, that they were just lining up just anywhere. I mean, they were just moving him around on the line because he was having success against everybody. So it's just, we're going to put him here, let him attack this person. And then the quarterback, I mean, they have no idea where he's coming from. And yeah, just between that and the schemes for me, this offensive line just never found that mesh point. They were just never able to get it right.
I'm with you, man.
I go back to last year, and I just didn't think it could get any worse at that left tackle position, and here we are. And it's
I said the same thing.
And I hate to keep thinking about it. And maybe that's part of the reason why I was more worried about the right, because I thought, well, they'll have to figure the left out. I mean, there's no way it gets worse.
They have to have shored that up, yeah.
And here we are. I mean, here we are. But I think going into this, a lot of people too, and there were comments from Courtlandt. I really thought we would see Skoronski at the left tackle position. I really did going into this season. I thought at some point he might get a shot at that left tackle position, and it just never happened that way. And I think Courtlandt even said just jokingly, yeah, next year we might see what he can do there. But legitimately, I thought that was a possibility, and it just never worked out that way.
Yeah, honestly, I think that comment was just to, I guess, throw some shade that we're not going after a left tackle, because everybody in the world knows that we're going for a left tackle.
Yep.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But I say you throw Alt or Fashanu in there, and all of a sudden you have one of the strongest left sides.
Yeah.
In my opinion, especially if you can get like, well, I'm not. You know what? I'm not doing draft picks. We'll do that in a couple shows. It's cool, man. Yeah. So yeah. All right. So overall, what do you give the team? Offense. Excuse me. Just the offense, not the defense.
Just offense as a whole.
Yep. Okay. Offense only. What's our offensive score?
I don't think I can sit here, and I'm not taking averages or anything, but I don't think I can sit here and give them anything better than a C-.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. C-.
Yep.
Because they're not quite average.
Right.
They're just a little bit crappier than average, which stinks. You know, that means we're like in the lower third of the NFL.
Yep.
Actually, almost lower fourth of the NFL. But
yep.
Point is, we're not doing well.
If you go back before the A.J. Brown trade happened, if you go back, just let me take everybody back to a better time in their lives. If you go back to when that trade happened, I really felt like they were just maybe a piece or two away from having a really elite offense in the NFL. And as I sit here today, I feel like it's going to take a lot more than that. And I hate to go back to that trade, because we've seen, you know, there may have been locker room issues with A.J. Brown, and I really don't want to dive into that too much. And I don't want to put everything on that decision, because they're bad for a lot of other reasons. But now I feel like even with the coaching stuff, like you've got to find a better scheme. You've got to find better talent. You've got to find better players. It just seems so far removed from where we were a couple years ago. And I think Courtlandt's still the right guy to get things figured out. I mean, just with what he's been able to do. And I do have a lot of faith in the guy. But I'm just realistically going from a C- this year. I'm hoping we can just get to like a B to B+ next year. I just don't feel like this is going to be an elite offense for a good 2 to 3 years. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
I don't know. I think there is a formula that we could at least be competitive to the point of getting into the postseason. You know, I don't know if we'll be bowl bound or not, but look, man, is it out of the realm of possibility? Absolutely not. No. Look at the Texans right now. You know, I mean, they were pretty much in the same situation we are right now last season. They might have had a worse record than we do. I don't know. I can't remember. I don't keep up with the Texans that well. My point is that they went from terrible to now competing. At least they even went past the first round. They actually spanked them. It was pretty.
That's true. Yeah,
it was pretty wild to watch. But my point is that it's not out of the realm of possibility. There is a good formula for it, and we definitely have all the ingredients to make a delicious Super Bowl cake.
Right.
But I just don't know if we're going to put all those ingredients together at just the right time, bake them at just the right, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and let me clarify a little bit. I think there are very much worse positions to be in. I would much rather be looking.
Yeah, we could be the Panthers.
Exactly. I would much rather be looking for pieces, and this doesn't apply directly to the Panthers, but I would much rather be looking for offensive lineman positions and wide receiver positions than I would be quarterback positions and running back positions. Because that's going to be the main thing. You, like you said, you've got the ingredients, you've got some of the right pieces. You just have to find a way to make them work. And again, this isn't all about players either. This goes back to scheme and what they're able to do and use their people to their advantages. So yeah, there are worse positions to be in. I do think that the first round of this draft, and I don't want to dive necessarily straight into it, but your first pick has to be offensive line. I mean, you've got to get that spot figured out first, and then build from there. And then receiver, you know, I know we'll get into some of the acquisitions later down the road, but I mean, to me, Higgins has to be your first choice. You've got to get a complimentary receiver. You've got to get a good offensive lineman and then build off that. So I do think they can compete as an offense next year. I'm just not ready to say that they're going to be up there with one of those, you know, as one of those elite teams and able to win shootouts. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, all right. So I also wanted to bring up just quickly, because, you know, there's a lot, the coaching prospects.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, like I said, there's a lot. We already have interviewed, I don't know, let's see, Mike Kafka, Antonio Pierce.
I
was going to say, I feel like we interviewed Callahan too.
Callahan did a virtual interview, which I don't think you can even do in-person interviews till the divisional round of the playoffs.
Yeah. No,
so, yeah. But I do think Callahan did a virtual interview, yes. I think he was the very first one.
Yeah, and you know, like I was saying to the wife, cast your net. You know, cast a really wide net. I like that. I like the fact that they were like, can I talk to pretty much everybody that I like in the league? I want to bring in like I think they asked for 9 people, or they have so far 9 different people. Mm-hmm. For me, though, just really quickly, why none of these guys I would want as a prospect. Mike Kafka, well, because he's the offensive coordinator for the Giants, and their offense is putrid.
Yep.
He is young, though. That's the only thing he's got going for him.
Yeah.
In my eyes. Antonio Pierce, probably going to stay in Las Vegas, and he's also 45 and is kind of the version of Mike Vrabel.
Exactly.
Aaron Glenn, DC for Detroit, no. And he's 51. No. Mike McDonald, the only DC prospect I would actually be okay with, I guess, but really don't want a defensive guy.
He's my number 4 right now, believe it or not.
Really?
Yep. Now, all 3 ahead of him are offensive minded, but if you take away my top 3 offensive guys and it falls to a 4th guy, I would take Mike McDonald over any of the other offensive minds out there other than those 3, if that makes sense, if I said that right. But yeah, outside of the 3 offensive minds I want, I do like Mike McDonald. He's my number 4 right now.
Right on, man. Like I said, he's the only one of the defensive coordinators that I would be okay with.
Yep.
And then we got Dan Quinn, man. Defensive coordinator for Dallas, and oh my God, Dallas looked awful last year. They were one and done 3 different times in the play. Honestly, Dan Quinn might be the next coach of the Cowboys if they don't hire Mike Vrabel, like the whole media is saying, but still haven't heard a peep from him.
Yeah, right. Didn't they just give up? What did they give up to Green Bay? 48? Is that right? I mean, that's insane. That's insane.
I was floored, man. Jordan Love went off for 3 touchdowns. I know that.
Yeah, I thought being a Tennessee fan was hard. I don't know. It'd be tough to wear stars right now.
Dude, are you kidding? The only ones that think they're competitors every year are them.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know. They had me fooled this year. I really thought they were going to go deep this year because they had everything just kind of fell into place. Dak was playing on another level until December, and then he started falling apart. And, it's just terrible. So my top 4 are the 4 that I didn't mention, obviously. Brian Callahan, Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, and is it Brian Johnson? I think it is Brian Johnson.
Oh, I've got Ben Johnson. I'm sorry. I thought it was Ben Johnson.
There are 2 different ones, 2
Oh,
Johnsons.
gotcha. Yes.
Brian is
There's
from
Brian
the
and Ben. Yes.
Eagles. Yes.
Yes.
All right. So obviously Brian Johnson's from the Eagles. He's only had 1 year as an OC, so he's not great in my eyes, but 36 years old. And he had a significant role in developing Hurts, which really doesn't hold a lot of water right now because Hurts is playing like crap.
Right.
But he's 4th on my list, whatever.
Okay.
The number 3 for me would be Ben Johnson. 37, 2 seasons as the offensive coordinator, showed an amazing talent for scheming. Yesterday, he was amazing. No, you might have tuned in a little late, but yeah, no, I ran over the 5 coaches I don't want, and Pierce is one that I don't want, and I think he's going to stay in Vegas. So,
agreed.
Just to answer that real quick, out of those 2, what do you think? What do you think about those 2 guys, Link?
I'm definitely Ben Johnson over Brian Johnson. Ben Johnson is actually my number 3 as well. I agree. I mean, he's the most successful offensive coordinator in Lions history. And that shocks some people. He's 21-13, and that doesn't include, the first playoff win in 32 years for the Lions.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone in itself says a lot. The only thing that gets me on Brian Johnson, and like you said, it's his first year as an OC. That makes me a little bit nervous, and maybe it shouldn't. I would just rather see someone come in who's got a resume, if that makes sense. I feel like I don't want to take a chance on somebody at this point, because I do want this team to be competitive, and I don't necessarily. And I think Amy's kind of the same way. I don't think she, if the right guy comes along and he's young and he's new and he's fresh, then so be it. I would just rather see somebody in there with some experience who's a little bit more proven. So for me, I think Ben Johnson for sure. He's my number 3. You want me to run through my top
Keep
4?
going. Yeah, go
Okay.
for it.
So Callahan would definitely be my first one, the OC from the Bengals, just because of what he's been able to do with Burrow. Now, I know Burrow's talented, but he has been able to work with him and find success with him. And then for me, when Burrow went out, what he was able to do with Jake Browning, just his schemes, just the way that he uses his players to his advantage, I think it's tough for him not to be my number 1 choice right now. My second would be Bobby Slowick from the Texans. This guy's got ties to Carthon, and I've said it, and mark it on this show. I think it's his job to lose right now, whether that be a good thing or a bad thing because of his ties to Carthon. But I mean, he's he had this great playoff push. He puts together solid game plans. I think he's been a huge help for CJ Stroud and what he's been able to do. So I definitely see some development skills there. But yeah, he'd be my number 2. But I think looking at it from the outside in, I do think he's probably Carthon's first choice. So we'll see what happens when the interview happens. But I think it's his job to lose. And then Ben Johnson's my number 3. I talked about him. And then Mike McDonald, just the Ravens DC. If I had to get outside of those top 3 guys I just listed, I would go Mike McDonald even over another offensive mind. I just think he's put together some great schemes on defense, something that I felt like this team lacked this year on the defensive side of the ball. And he's got development skills too. I mean, we've seen him take some guys like Patrick Queen, for example. I mean, he's been able to really bring some guys in on that Ravens defense and have a lot of success with them. So those will be my top 4, but I'm definitely holding out for Callahan. He's number 1 by a long shot, and then everybody else just kind of falls into place after that.
Yeah, man, I love it. One of my favorite things about you is that you sometimes are the contrarian to me.
Yeah.
Which is nice. It's nice to have,
Yeah.
The other side of the coin sometimes.
Yep.
But I also like it when we agree. Or it's nice anyway. Because we didn't talk about this pre-show or anything. But yeah, my number one pick is Brian Callahan.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is he's been the OC for 5 years.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people say he don't call plays. even if he doesn't call plays. The point is he's putting together a scheme for the offense.
Exactly.
And like you said, he developed Burrow. And when you look at Burrow, does he not kind of have very similar attributes to Will Levis?
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure.
Pocket, deep ball throw. I mean, so for me, that's why he just is number one. The experience in the coaching and dealing with Joe Burrow, which also is a prima donna.
He is.
So he'd be good at handling someone like Hopkins, or if we had somebody like AJ, he would be able to handle him a little bit better than he was being handled.
Even past Burrow, I mean, Jamar Chase. I mean, if you're able to deal with Jamar Chase, I mean, if you're able to deal with Jamar Chase, I mean, you can deal with anybody, in my opinion. So, but absolutely.
The only reason that Bobby Slowick is my number two, because I've been highly impressed with this kid.
Yeah.
The only two knocks I have for him is, one, he does seem to come from the 49ers coaching tree, which seems to be Ran Carthon's buddies, and it just makes me itch all over when you say something about somebody hiring their buddy here. Yeah. Something just, I don't know what it is. I just tweak a little bit. So there's that. But he's also a first-year offensive coordinator, even though he's had amazing success. How much of that really, you know what I mean? I'm a prove it guy. I say that all the time. But he has worked both sides of the ball. Exactly. Which is another interesting aspect to him, is that he has been a defensive coach and an offensive coach. And we know he is very good at offense, at least a little bit, just because of the scheme he runs. So he's my number two. Callahan's my number one because of the experience. That's the only reason. Well, and the dealing with the prima donnas or whatever that he has to deal with in Cincinnati. But that's my rundown. Glad we agree on the coaches.
I like it. Yeah, that's pretty wild. I honestly, again, we did not talk about this before the show. Kind of wild to see that we've got at least the first three favorites.
Now as long as Rand and Amy think like we do, we're just golden, man. We're golden.
We're good. Yeah, I mean, if y'all want to call us in, we're more than happy to chat. We'll help y'all out.
Absolutely.
With anything y'all need.
We can write it down, stamp it.
Yep. Might have a little bit of a finder's fee in there somewhere, but that's okay. We'll work on that later.
Yeah. I'm easy, dude. I'm cheap too.
Yeah, I'm a lot cheaper than all of the guys we just listed. So
that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
All right, so that pretty much wraps up our offensive grades for this week. Next week we'll obviously go over the defensive grades, and then we'll talk about special teams and free agents and draft picks.
Yep.
Next week.
Sounds
so,
good.
Anything else you want to say? Final thoughts?
No final thoughts. Again, it's going to be a long off season. This thing, it's going to drag out a little bit, but there will be some highlights, a lot of stuff to talk about. So just make sure you stick with us, and be careful out there on these roads. It's wild out there. It's white. It's wild. So, just be careful, and excited to talk to y'all again on the next one.
Yeah, man. Again, you should know, if you don't know, where to follow us at Titans Global Podcast, pretty much anywhere you get your social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. YouTube is obviously where we want you to go. Please like and subscribe. That helps us the most. And if you want to follow me, Maximus Titan Fan, Twitter and Facebook, and Link Rogers, you can find him at Facebook or Twitter also. Until next time, which... yeah, I think we're going to go with just Monday shows for now. So until next time, tighten up.
Tighten up.
Peace out.